This conference will now be recorded.
Yay, just so that everybody's aware. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming today, making the time to be with us. I'm Stacy Hazler. I work at PostgreSQL Experts. I'm also the president of the United States PostgreSQL Association. PGUS sponsors a number of the local pugs, and we're one of them, so we're very happy about that association. And today, before we begin, the meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube afterward. If you choose to ask a question using your camera and/or mic, you will be part of that recording. Your voice will be recorded. If you have your camera on, your image would also be captured. If you don't ask a question, you're not going to be part of the recording. So if you want to ask a question but don't want to be recorded, you can send a chat request to the organizers. If you go over to your chat window, at the bottom, there's a drop down. You can send to just organizers only. Send us a note, say, I have a question. And when it's your turn to ask a question, we'll let you know so that you can turn on your microphone and ask. If you don't want to turn on your microphone and ask, you can type the question. We'll ask the speaker for you, and that way you're not recorded. If you have any technical issues during the event, please, again, drop a message to the organizers, and we'll do our best to take care of it. So today, we are delighted to welcome Laetitia Avrot. And Laetitia is with EDB. She is treasurer of Postgres Europe. She founded Postgres Women, and she's a very active, highly visible person in the community, and we're delighted to have her. And she is going to be talking to us about PGSQL. And now I am going to make Laetitia the presenter. Come on, I would like a little cooperation here now, software. And Laetitia, you are now the presenter. Please take over.
Yes.
Take over.
I can now share my screen. The slides will be available after the presentation. I'm so sorry. Normally, I try to have them available before, but I was a little in a rush to finish them. So they will be only available after. Yes. Okay. So I will be talking about PSQL and how awesome it is, because it seems that a lot of people are missing this information. So first, let me present myself. As Stacy said, I'm Laetitia Avrot. I'm PostgreSQL Europe treasurer. I work for EDB as a senior database consultant. And I've founded Postgres Women. I'm also a PostgreSQL Project recognized contributor. You can find information about what I discover on a normally it should be on a daily basis. Let's say lately it's more on a monthly basis on mydbnotebook.org, where I write down everything I think that I might need to recall later. You can follow me under Twitter with L_Avrot. And I try to keep my Twitter professional, but it's Twitter, so sometimes you can see some kitty pictures. So if you're allergic to any kitty picture or unicorn pictures or things like that, don't subscribe to my Twitter account. Let's deep dive. Why would I want to speak about PSQL? The first thing is I created a website called psql-tips, where you will have a random tip about PSQL. Maybe you already know that, maybe you don't. You can try getting another random tip, or you can see them all. At the moment, I have something like 120 tips. My goal is to have between 200 and 300 when I will be finished with that website, which will never be finished because there are improvements to PSQL with each new versions of Postgres. So, but after I will just have to update it with new features. So it will be more easy. So the first question you might ask yourself about PSQL is why? Why would I want to use a command line tool client to connect to Postgres? The first reason is it's the only official client to Postgres. There are other clients, but they're not official. This one is already shipped with Postgres core and will always be. The second reason why you would like to use it is because it's efficient, but you might not be convinced that it's efficient. So you will see later how I use it and why I think it's more efficient than any graphical tool. My third reason is because it's text. When it's text, it means that the commands I enter and the result I get are text, so can be really easily saved into a text file. That's very, very useful when I work on a production, because everything I enter and the result I get are automatically registered into a text file that I can use to write a report about what I did, the difficulties I encountered, maybe the mistake I made, because everyone makes mistakes, but it's easy to record what you do. So it's good for security, and it's good for when you do mistake, because you can safely and easily go back to what you did in order to solve the problem. And the other reason that I like to use command line tools, and it's not only PSQL, but also a text editor like Vim and so on, it's because when I work in a public place, people think that I'm a hacker doing some secret business, hacking into FBI computers and things like that. And that's so cool, don't you think? So that's not a very good reason, but that's still one. And my children are so proud of me when I'm working on a command line tool that it's worth it. So now that we've seen that there are several reasons why you'd like to use, oh, I forgot one reason. Sometimes your graphical tool on your desktop won't work to connect to the server. You don't know why, but when you're called at 2 a.m., it's not the time to learn how to use a command line tool. You need to be ready to use that. And servers in production most often don't have a graphical interface. So you need to be able to use command line tools in case any graphical tool is not available for your special environment. So first, we will simply see how to connect to Postgres. So most of the time, what we say is we invoke the PSQL client using the PSQL keyword with a host, here localhost, with a port, here the default Postgres port 5432, with a username, here it's Lætitia, and a database name, here it's test, and you can connect to Postgres. You see that you have some kind of welcome message giving you your PSQL version. If it's different from the server version, you will see it here. You see that I'm working on the Postgres 15 in development, because it's not out yet. And you see that PSQL is kind enough to tell you that if you need some help, just type help. So let's see what you can do about the host option. So the first thing that I use is using a host, a local host, or the IP for localhost. You can use --host or -host to invoke the host you want to connect to. And it will connect you. So you see I use the meta command coninfo that will give information how you are connected to which database with which user, on which host, and on which port. So here you see that I'm connected using localhost. And you see that it's also using an IP version 6 and not version 4, because we have ::1 as the IP address. But what if I use the environment variable PG host? Then I will connect using, so I will export my environment variable, and then I will simply invoke PSQL without the --host or -h option. And then it will connect using this environment variable. But you might say, maybe localhost is the default. And so I could say, I could omit the export of the PG host environment and it will still connect to localhost. That's not true. The default for PSQL host is a socket connection using the /tmp socket. So a socket connection is just a file where Postgres will write. And so by default, it's /tmp. And you can also say that as a host, you'd like to connect using a socket, and this socket is in /tmp. In that case, it will connect using that specified options. But you can go further. What if I try to connect using another socket directory? So let's try to connect using /user/local/pgsql/data, which is my database cluster directory. And you will see that there's a problem because my OS user, Lætitia, does not have access to that directory. So it can't write the .s.pgsql.5432, which is a default name for a socket file, and you can change it. But you can change the directory for your socket. So let's say, okay, OS user Lætitia does not have access to this directory. What if I use Postgres instead? Because Postgres has write access on that directory. So I will try it with Postgres. And then Postgres will tell me, no, it's not right because there is no such file as a socket file I'm looking for in that directory. So that's not the socket directory. You can find the socket directory by querying the PG settings view or looking at your PostgreSQL.conf file. Sorry, my husband is closing the windows from downstairs. Okay, so you can find that querying with the socket keyword, you will find where the socket directory is if it uses a socket group and the permissions of this socket. So here it's default, it will write into /tmp. It's important. I have seen a project where they were using different sockets to write into a different socket directory so that they could use the same port for all Postgres instances on the same host. They were all listening to the port 5432 in local mode, but only on sockets, and they were using different directories. That was weird, but it worked. Then let's talk a little about the port. So you have to connect to a port Postgres is listening to. Here, for example, I use --port 5433 or -p, it's exactly the same. And you will see that I will connect to that port. You can use the environment variable PG port, same thing, 5433, and then it will connect accordingly. The default, as I already said, is 5432. And there's not so much you can say about ports because it's just a number that you can use. You can change it. Just, I've seen customers in my career thinking that they were securing their Postgres by changing the port number. Changing the port number does not secure anything. It's a little less obvious for some people that it's a Postgres server listening to on the other side. But for a real hacker, it won't secure anything. So just don't think that everything is secured because you're not using Postgres default port. About user. So you can use --username or capital U. Capital U is important. Lowercase u won't work. And you will be connected with the user you specified as long as this user is authorized to connect and has and exists. Then you can use the environment variable PG user, and you will be connected again as the user you specified. And the default, and that's a little weird, the default is the same as the OS user you're using. So as my OS user is Lætitia, and I created a Lætitia user on my on my cluster, then I can be connected as the user Lætitia. Now, the database, there are 3 ways to tell PSQL on which database it has to connect. First, you need to remember that when you connect to Postgres, you always connect to one database. You never connect to the cluster. You will always be connected on the database level. The first one is to just give the database name without any option, and it will work. You can use --db name, and that's a typo on my slide because the last should be -d, because lower d works also to say that you're using this database name. And you will be connected here in the test database because that's a database I asked for. You can use an environment variable like PG database, and it will connect you still to the database test as you asked. And that's already also another typo here because there shouldn't be test after PSQL. Because when you use an environment variable and on top of that you give an option to your PSQL invocation, the option will override. Well, actually, it will never go to look at the environment variable. The option will take precedence. You can also, yeah, there's a typo here too. There should be test. I think it's some kind of weird copy paste. So if you don't use any database name, if you don't have the PG database environment variable set, then you will be connected to the database with the same name as the user. Here, as the user is not specified either, it will use the same as the OS user. So it will use the user Lætitia, so it will look for a database named Lætitia. And I had already created a database named Lætitia, so it's able to connect. But you can go way further with the database name. The database name can be used to give to PSQL a connection string that you might know if you're a developer, because developers always connect to the database using a connection string. So here you will see that first the connection string begin with PostgreSQL, just to say that you will be connected to a PostgreSQL database. And then what you see is the user. So you see you choose the Lætitia user. Then you have the host IP. Here it's localhost. Then the port 5433. And then you have the name of the database. So you will be connected to the test database. You can also use a key value string instead of a connection string. So here, using the exact same example, I use the user Lætitia on localhost for port 5433 on database test. And the last thing I'd like to tell you about how to connect is service file. I think that service files are totally underestimated in Postgres world. A service file is a way to configure all your connection and to invoke them using only one keyword that you defined as the service name. It means that once you defined all your connections, you can send this file to a colleague so that they can easily connect to Postgres as easily as you do, just using the same keyword as the service name. So here I created a service file. You see that it's located under my home, and the name is .pg_service.conf. between square brackets, you have the service name, MyDB, and then you have the host with, I will use localhost. The port, I did not specify the port because I will use the default port. If I had to use a port, I would simply have used port equals and the name of the number of the port. Then you have the username and the database name. You can add any options you want to a service file, like variables, environment variables for PSQL, and so on. And here I can connect using the string connection string service equals MyDB, and you will be connected using the local host on port 5432 with user test on database Lætitia. You can use another service file if you specify the PG service file environment variable so that you can know what service file to use. I use that under Microsoft Windows because I don't remember where is the default path for the service file under Windows, whereas I totally know it for Linux. So you can export this environment variable, and then you see here I have another file, and I will be connected. Instead of the database name Lætitia, I will use database name test. So you see localhost for 5432, user test, and the database is test this time instead of Lætitia. So do you have any question about how to connect? Okay, so
there aren't any questions about that. No.
Okay, great. So I'll keep going. First, the shell or batch mode. This is what you will use when you will have to schedule things in cron or when you will want to invoke PSQL from a script. So the first way to just send a query to PSQL is using the -c flag, which means C as command. And it will give you a render of the result of your query. You can use several queries inside the double quote string for the -c flag, but it will only give you the value of the last query. And just one thing that I find very, very useful, it's when I try to set up a standby, I need to test that I can connect using a replication connection to the queen or the primary node. I use PSQL-C identify system with the replication string replication equals true and the name of the database I need to connect to. I can use add the user and things like that. And then it will either answer or it will simply fail. And I know that should I need to put in place a replication system, there's no connection problem between my princess or secondary node and my queen or primary node. That's very, very useful, and I use it very, very often. Another way to give commands to PSQL is to use a file. So here I created a file called query.sql, which has a select star from test, and I will play it using -f and the name of my file. The name is a complete path. It can be relative or not. So here I have the result of my query. And it works the same way as it worked with -c. The difference is when you have two queries, like I had with the -c, it will give you the result for the two queries. So that might be what you're looking for when you want to issue several queries. You might want to have the result of all of them. So in that case, use the -f flag instead of the -c flag. Let's go to interactive mode. I don't say a lot about the batch mode because I know that should you need it, you will look into the help because there is no other way than invoking PSQL from a script or from a cron tab than using PSQL in batch mode. Was interactive mode, there's other tools to go to Postgres. So let's see how good PSQL is. First, as I said, when you connect, you will have a welcome message with one thing very important saying type help for help. And then you will see here a name and then equals and a sign here. That's called the prompt. Let's see how the prompt works. So here you will have by default, and you can change it because the prompt is defined only by an environment variable of PSQL. Go to psql-tips.org to find out how to change it. But by default, it's the database you're connected to. And then you have what I call a help character here, and you will see why I call it a help character, and let's say a supporter character. So I say it's a help character because should you not end your command, the equals here will be changed into a dash. That's very important because most of beginners forget the semicolon at the end of the query. Then they send another query or twice the same, and then they have an error because PSQL is complaining that the syntax is not correct. Of course, you have two queries and no semicolon to end it. When you open a parenthesis, PSQL will tell you, I'm waiting for this parenthesis to be closed. When you will open a quote, it will tell you, I'm waiting for this quote to be closed. And the same with double quotes. Just remember that in SQL, quotes are for strings and double quotes are for identifiers, meaning object names. Don't use double quotes for strings because it won't work. Then with Postgres 13, we have something new that when you begin a transaction, you will have a little star here. You can do that for Postgres before Postgres 13. You will have to change the prompt's environment variables to have this behavior. It's a star when everything is fine, you're inside a transaction and you can commit. And I think it will change this star into a sharp should any error happen and should you only have to roll back your changes instead of committing them. And then there's this character, this separator. Normally, when you connect as a non-super user, it's this greater than character. But if you're connected as a super user, and obviously I couldn't create a Lætitia user without this user being a super user. So here, when I connect using Lætitia, it's a super user, and the sharp here tells me it's a super user. Let's go to the basics of using PSQL. So first thing, if you want to create PSQL, use \q. You can now, from Postgres 12, you can use exit, but why not using \q as all other meta commands of PSQL use / at the beginning. If you need help, type help. That's what the welcome message said. But you can invoke the help using \?. It will give you help about PSQL meta commands. But should you need some help about an SQL command, you will use \h. You can even use \h and the beginning of your SQL command you'd like to have some help about. For example, \h, alter table, and so on. About setting, you can use variables with PSQL. So the way to set a variable is to use \set variable value. pset are used to set variables that will change the result display. And then you can set environment variables for PSQL using \setenv. So if we use it as an example, here I used a variable called setting name, and I add the value wall. Then I use a query using that variable here. So you see the column here says that it's a variable. I have the quotes here because I need my variable to be quoted because it's text. This column value is text. And it will give me the result. You can also use it inside a file. For example, I created a file with that query inside. And if I want to use it with the batch mode, I will use -- variable, and the name of the variable equals the value of the variable. And it will display the query. You can also add variables inside your connection strings. I let you look at the libpq manual to find out how to do that. If you want to get rid of that awful pager that is by default on, it's this thing that will display the result in a way that you can scroll down or up, and that you need to do queue to quit. I really hate it, and I'd rather have my results, even if there are more too much information. I'd rather have them in the output than having them in that awful pager. So most of the time I use pset pager off. You can put that in a .psql-rc file that will set it for all your sessions. I don't do it because I work on my customer's production host, and I will never change the default behavior of my customer's production host. So as I work, when I work locally on my desktop, I don't do it either because I need to be ready for hostile environments. You can also use \setenv to use environment variable, like, for example, which PSQL editor you'd like to use. I love Vim, so I will set the PSQL editor variable to Vim. Now you're connected to the database and you like to have information about the cluster, about the different databases, about the schemas, about tables, and so on. The first thing you need to know is \l. It will list all the databases on that cluster. \d will describe objects that will match the pattern you gave. If you have two objects with the same name, it will use the search path and give the information relative to the first object the search path will find. \dn will display information, will list the namespaces. Namespaces mean schemas. \dt will list tables. All these commands can be used with a pattern for an object name, but you won't find any information regarding a view by using \dt because it's not a table, it's a view. \df will give you information about a function or a stored procedure. One thing that I love with Postgres is you can learn just by using it. If you set the echo hidden variable to on, then when you will use \dt, for example, to look for the table test, you will see the query PSQL issued here to find this table, and then you will have the result. This echo hidden on will display the query used for any \d command. It's very good to find out how the catalog works and how it's better to use the catalog, because it's easier to refine a query coming from there than writing from scratch. Now, maybe you know \x. \x will toggle the result on from horizontal to vertical view. And \g is very important. It will replace the last query in the buffer. So here, for example, I used select star from page settings where name equals Maxwell Sanders. And I had the result in a way that's not very readable for a human. So if I combine, okay, so a slide is missing here because I wanted to say that you can combine \g and \x to use \jx so that it will replay the result, but will display the result on vertical mode instead of horizontal. You can also use HTML format. Using pset format HTML, your output format will be HTML. Then with \g you will replay, and then you will have a nice HTML code that you can copy paste into a Markdown report, or that you can simply send as a standalone HTML file to anyone you want to share the result with. You can even use jQuery entry tables on top of it to be able to search from values or to sort your output table. If you don't want your results to be aligned, here you see spaces are added so that they're aligned with the column header. You can use format unaligned, and it will just give the result. The default separator is a pipe. But you can go with CSV. So just use format CSV, and then you will have all your results in CSV format. You might think that it's not very useful to have the output here in standard output, where CSV is normally something you want to store in a file. That's why you can use \o with a file name so that it will create the file. Be careful, if the file already exists, it will write over it. And then you can just send the query, and you will see here that the file contains the result of the query. Here, \! is a way to play OS command inside PSQL. That's very useful if you forget to create a directory before sending your output there or things like that. I use it here just to cut the output file. Then you can do the exact same thing when you want to use a file to give a query to Postgres. So here I have a query.sql file with a simple query, and I can invoke it using \i for input, query.sql. And then if I look at my output, I will have here my first CSV output and here my second. Maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you'd like to have, in particular for CSV file, you'd like to have another file for another query result. In that case, you will need to use another \o command before issuing your new query. And what if you'd like to use again the standard output? You can always quit PSQL and come back, but that's not very satisfying. You can simply do it using \o without any file, and it will go back to standard output. History. With PSQL, you can use the history like you use it under Linux, meaning you can go back on history commands using the up and down arrow, and you can control R on your history of commands to find replay, to look for a specified keyword to find out to replay a query or a command you already issued. That's very useful. Now let's go deeper. If you'd like to play a query frequently, you can use \watch. \watch with here an integer with a number of seconds will replace the exact same query every n seconds. Here I said 1 second, so he played it here and he played it here again, and so on. You can also use something that I love. It's when you have a query, you'd like to use a function over your result. And it says that there is no function with the argument type. And what you're guessing is that this, it says that it's text here. So I query and I see that it's numbers, but if I use \gdec, it will replace the query, but instead of giving the result, it will give the type of the columns. And I see that my column settings is indeed in text type. So I need to cast it to order to use my sum function here so that I can now get a sum of these settings. Not that it really means something here. I just wanted to show you that it happens sometimes that you're looking for something and you'd like to have the type of the result of your columns. It can be done with \gdec. It was added with Postgres 12. So before Postgres 12, you won't have access to it. Now, if I begin a transaction and I look at the owner of my table test, here it's Lætitia, because it was created with that user. Then I will create a query that will forge another query. That's something that we do really often when we are a DBA in production. But then the way to perform this query before was to output the result inside a file and then play the file. But you can do better with Postgres. With Postgres, you use \gexec, and it will execute the result of the query in the buffer. And here you see that my table test is now owned as a user test. And this is the end of this presentation. There are other tips, but not so useful as the one I selected. Feel free to ask any question relevant to PSQL or Postgres.
Great, thank you so much, Lætitia. Yay! Round of applause. Let's see. We do have a question in the queue. The question is, isn't pgadmin also an officially supported tool, even though it's not detailed in the PostgreSQL documentation?
No, pgadmin is a tool proposed by EDB. So it's created by a company. It's not maintained by the PostgreSQL project. So it's not an official client to Postgres.
Okay, great, thank you. Hopefully that got the question answered. And I'm just scrolling through the chat to make sure. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't see anything else in the chat right now, but we have a lot of people and maybe somebody has a question. Oh, yep. Okay, let's see. Okay, oh, that's not a question. It's a random Okay. Well, I think that your presentation was so comprehensive and so well done. Oh, wait, no, we do have a question. I could not make the identify_system query work. Could you go back to it, please?
Yes, sure. And it will be on the slides. You need to respect the case of identify. That's not here, it's here. You need to respect the case of identify system. That's really mandatory because it's a command for PSQL. And the other reason that it could fail is because you can't connect using a replication connection. So maybe it's a HBA issue, maybe it's a user issue. There are several reasons why it could fail.
Great, thank you. Let's see, he says, yes, I did get a PG_HBA error.
I see one thing on my wish list is a progress indicator for long queries. Any hope of this? I'm sorry that I will destroy your hope here, but it's not possible. Well, we can have an estimate, but it can be very wrong. Actually, in IT, I've never seen any progress indicator being right, because most of the time it's estimating the time remaining. And if it's very long, like, of course, it's important for long queries, the probability that it's wrong is very, very high. So we might create that, but it will be wrong most of the time. And I'm not sure it could be a good thing to have something indicating wrong time, because actually we have no idea how long it will take.
Great, thank you. We have a comment. Oh, did not know about /gdesk. Thanks. So yay. And then we have a question. Fantastic presentation. I wanted to ask if there's a non-hackish way to automatically use a different psql-rc for different databases. If I recall correctly, there's a command line switch, but I can always forget to pass it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's for pset or environment variables, because most I guess what you're trying to do is having different environment variables for different databases, because it's different usage, and it totally makes sense. In that case, I would use different Linux users to connect to different databases, so that you will have a different psql-rc each time. Or you can use a service file. And in the service file, I guess there is an environment variable that you can set for each database with pointing to a different psql-rc. I will look into it, and I will add the answer into my Twitter account, or I will blog about it if it's too long. But yes, that's interesting.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then let's see, we have a, is there a way to append to a file /o only?
Yes. No, I don't have this question. Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. Let me just paste it into the general chat so you can see it, because maybe I'm not quite reading it correctly. Okay. So I just pasted it in the chat. Maybe it makes more sense.
I've asked myself this question yesterday when I was working on my slides. I haven't found it, but I will keep going. I will keep looking at it, and maybe that's something we can add to PSQL to make it better. Appending to the file seems quite legit.
Okay, and then Tobias just added a comment about dealing with that. So hopefully that's helpful for everyone.
Yes. No, there's a comment about using dash uppercase X because it's not longer implied, and if you don't, PSQL-RC, unexpected PSQL-RC file can fool you. Well, I've never experienced any problem because I've never had any PSQL-RC file, but I look into this option because I'm pretty sure I dismissed it when I used when I created when I sorted things to create PSQL-tips. So I will look into it and add this tip if it's really important.
Great, thank you, Lætitia. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So thank you so much, Lætitia. This has been really terrific, and we've got lots of good questions as well. So yay! And
I have a last word. Right after this meetup, there is a Postgres drink. It always happens on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. CEST. And so if you'd like to join, I will pass the address on the chat. You're welcome to join to discuss PSQL, Postgres, or whatever.
Great, thank you, Lætitia. It's funny, it was one of the things that Ads had pinged me saying, oh, can you mention this? And by the way, thank you to everybody who normally would have been in the Postgres Friends chat for the past hour for joining us here. But the Postgres Friends chat is a lot of fun, and the talk is sometimes about Postgres and sometimes about entirely other things. And Jitsi works in your web browser, so it's really super easy and it's a lot of fun. It's just a nice way to see people and spend a little bit of time together. Okay, so a couple of other things. The next PGUS associated meetup will be with the Postgres Columbus, Ohio group, but it's online, so you don't have to go to Ohio. And they're doing an introduction to Picardo, and that is Tuesday, July 27. And that is available on Meetup. If you can't find the link, drop us a note and we can connect you to that. The next San Francisco Bay Area Postgres will be on August 11. World Elephant Day is August 12. Last year, we had a representative from the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee do a presentation about the elephants for us. This year, we're going to do something a little different. We're calling it Elephants at the Watering Hole. We're going to be doing a water cooler talk. And instead of just one person doing a presentation, everybody gets a chance to jump in, share their favorite tips, their favorite tricks, their favorite war stories. And so we're looking forward to that. So please RSVP and have your ideas and suggestions and stories ready to go. And as always, we are looking for speakers for our future events, September and onward. If you're interested, again, please drop us a DM. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And again, thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you so much, Lætitia. I appreciate you giving us your time on a holiday evening. And that was really great. I learned things and it's like, oh, that's like, I didn't know that. So that's great. And we're getting lots of nice comments in the chat. So thank you again. We'll edit the video and post it on YouTube. We'll send out the link both through Meetup and on the social media. And everybody, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.